The sport of college football has basically been turned on its head in the last 3 or 4 years. It's just, it seems like everyone is going crazy. The realignment, conferences going away, NIL, transfer portals. It just, now as a content creator, it's been gold, right? Normally in the off season, you really struggle to find things to talk about. But over the last 2 or 3 years, there's been so much change in college football, a lot of which is brought up or initiated in the offseason. It gives us a lot to talk about, so I'm thankful for that. But some of these things that it appears may be coming down the pike or that are being floated around right now, it just makes you wonder if there's anybody at all in a position of authority within college football, whether it's head coaches, athletic directors, school presidents, conference commissioners, TV partners, anybody, anywhere that is just sitting back and going, wait 1 second here. Is this too much too soon? Is this what people really want? Because the answer to those questions is yes, it is too much too soon, and no, this is not what people want. Now, some of this stuff has been kind of divided. I personally don't mind the move from a 4-team to a 12-team playoff. It didn't happen overnight. We had a decade of the 4-team playoff. Almost every single year, there's a couple of teams bitching and moaning, or fan bases bitching and moaning at the end of the year about how the committee screwed this team, the committee screwed that team, whatever the case. I'm okay with going from 4 to 12. At 12 teams, college football still puts a lower percentage of its teams into the postseason than any other major sport on planet Earth. The NFL puts, 10 or 12 out of 32. That's almost a third of the teams getting in. Same thing with the NBA and Major League Baseball. College football has 134 Division I or FBS programs. 4 is like 3%. 12 is about 10%. So we're nowhere near the number of teams into the postseason on a percentage basis of some of these other leagues. So I was okay with going to 12. We haven't even had a year of the 12-team playoff, and now they're floating the idea of 14. Now, here's where I start to sort of put up some caution signs. If I'm being honest, I don't necessarily have a problem with 14 teams either, okay? If we would have gone from 4 to 14, I don't think the reaction by people would have been any different than their reaction to 12. So you've got some people who think 12 is a terrible idea. We should stay at 4. 4 is the right number. Changing it at all is ridiculous. You've got some people who don't understand why we went to 12. Why didn't we go to 16? Why didn't we go to 10? Is picking a random number there. My sort of issue with the 14-team idea being floated is it's too soon. We haven't even had an opportunity to see how the 12-team playoff is going to work. How fair or unfair is it going to be? How many teams seeded 9, 10, 11, or 12 are ever going to make a serious run in the playoffs or potentially play for or win a national championship? If we do a 12-team playoff for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and it's constantly somebody in the top 6 winning, do we really need to go from 12 to 14? And here's the thing. Again, I'm not against 14 teams, period. That's it. I don't understand the push to go to 14 when we haven't had a chance to experience the 12. Let's play this 12 thing out for a decade or so, like we did with the 14 playoff. Is it going to be perfect? No, there's never going to be a perfect solution. That's why I don't do the whole sky is falling routine when there's a change, because whether you like the change or not, college football wasn't perfect before. It's not going to be perfect after. There's no perfect solutions for college football. I'm willing to try different things and see what works. But with the 12-team playoff, it's like we're going to try it because we're going to do it for 2 years. But before we even see how good or bad it is, we already want to now change it to 14. Now, that seems like kind of a minor issue compared to what I think is the bigger issue. And I have a huge problem with this next one. And it's something that I have been speaking out against for years. And it's the idea that the Big Ten and the SEC are somehow better than college football as a whole. Now, I obviously think that the SEC and the Big Ten are the 2 best conferences right now. I don't really see how you can argue any point to the contrary. But being the best conference right now, or being better than the Big 12 or being better than the Pac 12 is different than acting as though you are better than college football as a whole. This idea that the SEC and the Big Ten should be separated from everyone else and treated differently, treated better, put up on a pedestal. Again, I'm making a clear-cut distinction between someone saying, man, the SEC and the Big Ten appear to be the two best football conferences and it's really not close. That's just an honest observation that someone can make. And I think it's okay to make that observation. It's also okay to disagree. I saw a graphic the other day where something like 9 Big Ten, or the Big Ten made the playoffs 9 times, the ACC made it 8. You know, so we can disagree on that observation, but it's an observation. It's a fair one to make, whether you agree with it or disagree, whichever side of that argument you're on. That's totally different than going, well, since we think the SEC and the Big Ten are the two best conferences, we think special rules should apply to them. They should get privileges and guarantees that no one else gets. They should be separated from everyone else. They're better than college football. Whatever rules we come up with to govern college football should not apply to the SEC and the Big Ten. They should be granted special privilege. I think that is a terrible, horrific idea. The idea that the SEC and the Big Ten can get together and bully the other conferences out of the way is ridiculous. Number one, how do you prove that one conference is better than the other? You play them. I'm not interested in no kind of college football where it's just the SEC and the Big Ten and we pretend the other things don't exist. Now, this idea that the SEC and the Big Ten should be given extra automatic qualifiers for the playoffs, I disagree. Yes, look, I know that in most years, over the last 10 years, the life of the playoff, that the SEC and the Big Ten have had more elite teams in a given year than the other conferences. But that hasn't always been the case, and it's not guaranteed to always be the case into the future. Why should we mold college football's rules around concerning the playoffs around two conferences that happen to be the best two conferences today? I think it's a terrible idea. I hope this idea doesn't go anywhere. If you don't know what you've probably heard by now, but there's the SEC and the Big Ten are floating the suggestion that they should be given extra playoff spots, guaranteed, not just conference winners. They want 3 guaranteed playoff teams a year. And they think the ACC should only have, let's say, 2. The Big 12 can only have 2. Out of all the group of 5, we'll give them 1. It's a terrible idea. Now, as far as the group of 5 is concerned, that's a different topic and a different argument for a different day. I think the group of 5 should have their own playoff, separate and apart from the other playoff. But that's because I don't think any of them are ever going to win it. And I think it's a disservice to people who play in group of 5 programs that they basically have no shot ever under any circumstances to win a national title. Being guaranteed a spot in the playoff is not giving them a chance to win a national title. It's not. They cannot compete. They just can't. They don't have the money, the facilities. They just don't have it. They should have their own separate postseason. That way, everybody involved in a group of 5 school has an opportunity to work their way into that postseason and potentially win it. Right now, that doesn't exist. But forget that for a second. Just the idea that we're going to say the SEC and the Big Ten get more teams than you do, no matter what, is a terrible idea. It's just a bad, bad idea. We don't know 5 years down the road how good or bad Miami will be. We don't know about Virginia Tech. We don't know about North Carolina, NC State, Syracuse, Boston College. I mean, over the last 10 years, these programs have not been playoff-worthy teams. I get that. That doesn't mean they won't be tomorrow, next year, or a year down the road. You look out in the Big 12, Utah. Utah is one of the most consistently good programs in the country. Oklahoma State, Arizona, West Virginia, BYU, Texas Tech, whatever. The idea that you play in this league, therefore you don't have as much of an opportunity to make the playoffs as teams that play in these 2 leagues, I think is a terrible idea. The Big Ten and the SEC are the 2 best conferences in football today. I'm going to repeat that again because there's going to be people in the comments that are going to say, well, the SEC and the Big Ten are the 2 best conferences. I know they're the 2 best conferences. But, pick a random year in basketball. We don't guarantee the Big 12 gets more teams in than the SEC or whatever other conference you want to name, just because as a whole, we think that this conference is better than that conference, generally speaking. It's ridiculous. You should get into the playoffs based off merit. Now, I am okay with automatic qualifiers. Conference champions, for example. I'm okay with conference champions getting an automatic berth into the playoff. I don't care if the ACC is garbage and the SEC is way better. If we're going to have automatic berths into the playoffs, the rules should be the same for all conferences involved. The winner should get in. Period. You take a look at the NFL, because I hear this argument in college football all the time. Well, there's 4 teams in the SEC that are better than the best team in the ACC, so it's not fair that the ACC gets their team in and 2 SEC teams have to sit out who are better than the ACC team. No, it's not fair. And that shouldn't have anything to do with it. You look at the NFL, okay? If you are the 5th best team in, let's say, the AFC, you're going to get into the playoffs. Well, it's very possible that the 10th best team in the NFC, the 10th best team in the NFC is better than the 5th best team in the AFC. That's possible. I'm not an NFL expert. I'd have to go back through the years and find a year where some team in the NFC who got left out of the playoffs was better than some team in the AFC that got in. That doesn't matter, nor should it matter. You play your games, you fight to win your division or your pod or whatever for a chance to play for your conference championship, and if you win that game, you get in. The idea that we're going to keep the ACC, we're not going to give the ACC as many opportunities. We're not going to give this conference as many opportunities. And I know they're not suggesting to leave a conference champ out, but the analogy is the same. If the SEC is going to be guaranteed 3 teams into the playoffs, then so should the ACC and the Big 12. No college football fan on earth, and I mean not a single one, and you're talking about a group of people who, in college football fans, who love nothing more than to argue about literally anything and everything. They will argue about mascots. They will argue about coaching wives. They'll argue about which coach was better in 1984. These people, myself included, are sick with that's all we do is argue. Yet somehow we all agree that we are not looking to turn the college football into the NFL with 2 conferences, each conference playing their own set of playoffs, and then the winner of the SEC playoffs plays the winner of the Big Ten playoffs in a national title game, and the SEC and the Big Ten are just going to pretend like the ACC, the Big 12, and everyone else just doesn't exist. We are not interested in that as college football fans. Now, I have gone to bat multiple times as a part of the minority defending some of the changes that have come down the road in college football over the last 4 or 5 years. I have defended NIL. I have defended the transfer portal. I've defended players getting paid. In fact, I think they should get paid directly from the universities. I'm even okay with them unionizing and becoming employees either of the school or the conference or whatever else to get personal money, to get the collectives out of recruiting, just make everything a paid position. You play left tackle for a Power 4, whatever we're calling it now, program, you make $50,000 a year. Doesn't matter whether you're at Georgia, Vandy, SMU, Houston, Pitt, Northwestern, Miami, NC State, doesn't matter. You're a left tackle on scholarship, you get $50,000 a year. You're a backup linebacker on scholarship, you get $30,000 a year. Clean across the board. I'm all for that, even though a lot of people are not. So I am not somebody who just blindly is against every single idea that comes down the pike in college football. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I have tried to open my mind and embrace all of these changes because I love the game of college football. And no matter what decisions they make, I'm going to keep watching. But I'm not the majority. Most fans are casual fans. College football set a TV ratings record last season. More people watched a college football game last season than at any other time in human history. Do not take that for granted, college football people, decision makers. It doesn't have to always be that way. The fans can and will find another way to fill their time and another way to spend their money. If they feel like they are constantly having their foot peed on by the powers that be in college football. The casual fan is going to tune out. And we poke fun at casual fans around the internet and things like that. But the reality is the overwhelming majority of fans of anything are casual. And without them, you don't have what you have now. You don't have 25 million people watching Michigan, Ohio State. You don't. You don't have 15 million people watching Tennessee and Alabama, or 25 million people watching Auburn, Bama. You don't have those numbers if you lose the casual fan. And by continuing to ignore the blinking red lights in front of you from college football fans, begging, pleading for you to slow down, to think some of these things through, to maintain at least something from college football that we recognize. The traditions, the rivalries, the pageantries, games on college campuses instead of NFL. Just you got to give us something. You got to give us something. I'm an SEC guy, okay? I think the SEC has the best football in the country. The best players, the best coaches, the best facilities. That doesn't mean the other conferences are horrific or don't deserve to be on an equal playing field with the SEC. What good is it to proclaim yourself to be the best conference if you have to give yourself advantages against the other conferences to prove it? Why does the SEC need to be guaranteed extra teams into the playoffs? Why does the Big Ten need to be guaranteed extra teams into the playoffs? Why? Why? If the SEC and the Big Ten are truly the two elite conferences going today, and I believe that they are, then in any random year down the road, they'll get more teams in than the ACC or the Big 12, won't they? Of course they will. Look at the final playoff rankings from any of the last 10 years. It's going to be more SEC teams and Big 10 teams than it is Big 12 or ACC in most years. Why? Because the SEC and the Big 10 are better in most years. You don't need to have a special carve-out that just gives everybody else a reason to point and go, see, the deck is stacked in favor of the SEC and the Big 10. It's ridiculous. If Pitt somehow goes 11-1 this year, they deserve to be in the playoffs. It doesn't matter that they've been garbage for the last 20 years. It shouldn't. If Nebraska has some kind of miracle, well, they're Big 10. I'm trying to do non-SEC and Big 10. If the Kansas Jayhawks figure it out for a whole season instead of just playing good for half a season like they've done the last 2 years, and they go 10-2 or 11-1 but lose the Big 12 title game, they probably deserve to be in a 12-team playoff. It doesn't matter if you think the sixth best team in the SEC would beat Kansas. That doesn't matter. If you're the sixth best team in any league, you don't deserve to be in a 12-team playoff. Being the sixth best team in the SEC is, who gives a shit? You don't deserve to be in over a top 2 team from the Big 12. They've got to stop. At some point, common sense has got to take over. That's it. And then it got me pissed off.